My name is Kaylee Stack, and I am a performance artist. My whole life, I've been performing since I was about 8. Musical theater, dance, experimental, avant-garde, buto, and then really became a full-time circus artist in my 20s. Toured around a little bit, started to coach at the San Francisco Circus Center, got into the Cirque du Soleil database after a 2-day audition, still walking, all the funky things. So that's definitely who I am. I started the Community Storytelling Composition Project to just basically find the intersection of my performance world and then my activism world. I did a little time as a researcher. I did an internship at the Smithsonian, and I found that everything was inaccessible in terms of the conversations we were having there, because it was primarily accessible only to those that had access to museums and archives and things like that. Also, it was primarily coming from a white male perspective, and I wasn't finding very many mentors of my own. So after leaving the Smithsonian, I returned to my performance career, and I was really trying to figure out a way to generate conversations around really important socio-political topics through the lens of performance. And that's what birthed the Community Storytelling Composition Project. And what I loved about performance is it can be a place for community gathering. The first project was A Right to Tell Your Story, and I just asked the community in which I was living in at the time if anyone had a personal account or a personal narrative they wanted to share that they felt their neighbors needed to hear. So I collected about 18 stories, age ranging from 18 to 72, and then we took all these stories and boiled them down into little sound bites and then wove them together into a collage of narratives, and that was overlapped onto music, so it became a 20-minute soundscape installation for a physical performance to be presented. And that was a way to bring about a less siloed experience for oral histories to be heard than the digital archiving or museum installations that generally these take place in. And we started that in 2013 and has just been building and going on ever since. So after the pilot project of A Right to Tell Your Story in Northern California, we went to Boulder, Colorado, did the second project under CSCP called Fracture, which was all about hydraulic fracking and narratives around that. The third project was around involuntary waste, paper receipts, and having a conversation and commentary around that. And then the fourth project under CSCP was around the Me Too movement. So all our projects have always been responding to pressing and socio-political conversations that were happening in the media at that time, even though we've all acknowledged that most of these issues are not new and they are as old as this country, but we're just responding to the immediacy that the media is responding. So in 2020, during the pandemic, the murder of George Floyd happened, and I was in New York City and protesting and on the streets as much as possible, and I wasn't sure if the Community Storytelling Composition Project was meant to respond to this in the context of the performance work that we've done in the past, because I am a white female and I knew that I was behind the CSCP. However, when I was on the streets in Washington Square Park and Prospect Park and showing up, I felt really complacent. As an artist and as a creative, most of my activism was always generated through these performances. And I looked around one day and I just saw that certain people were meant to be on the streets. Their way that their voices just held and kind of rallying a crowd. I was like, they are meant to be here. And I just looked at what I wasn't doing, and I realized that the CSCP project was meant to respond to this, and that's why it was created. So I asked a lot of directors and individuals in New York City, BIPOC directors and people that were in my community and not in my community, if this was a place for both the company as well as myself. And after getting vetted and getting tons of suggestions, we built out a board and started the project to call for justice in response to acknowledging the systemic injustices within the U.S. since the founding of this country. So we started to collect stories for A Call for Justice in July 2020. And then from July 2020 up until March 2021, we collected a total of 29 personal accounts of people sharing personal narratives around systemic injustices they've experienced, around reflections of those conversations, and also what they believe this is going to do moving forward. And really, it was anything, because the way the CSCP has always operated is it's not pointed in the sense of an interview, such as journalism, but it's just hosting a conversation over tea and bearing witness to someone's narrative. And with all these narratives, they were all recorded, and we created a digital archive on our website, and they're all accessible online in full. However, of course, we don't want to end there. So during the course of this project, we became a fieldwork partner with Columbia University's Oral History Master's Program. They provided us with an intern that really helped with the collection of the stories. But in December or January, we really started to need to make the soundscape. So we brought on Mario Schuning. He is the audio engineer for this project, and that's when we started to boil down all 29 narratives into little excerpts. And that became woven together like all the other ones, becoming a collage of narratives, creating what has now become our 20-minute soundscape once again for A Call for Justice. All the CSCP performances has always had a prop to give out to the audience or provoke the audience in a certain way to really communicate that they are part of the performance just as much as us. So for this specific project, to tell your story, we published a zine, and we collaborated with a Brooklyn publishing company. Michael Haley was the producer of the zine, and then we also collaborated with an Instagram page, a New York City Protest Through Art. And New York City Protest Art was really, really helpful in helping to get a call out to artists and poets asking who would want to be a collaborator in creating the zine. And more than 20 artists submitted their work, just really believing in the project, and we created this 44-page publication. And the way the CSCP is operated is everybody that is a part of each production, each performance, is a co-collaborator. So we're really operating on this horizontal level. We're kind of seeing the CSCP moving into a cooperative where everyone has a share in what's going on. But what we realized with the performance is that with the soundscape, we started to play it on different radio stations and speak about the zine, but the soundscape was only 20 minutes, and we have 29 personal accounts that have collaborated in creating the soundtrack. And that meant that not all stories were being amplified, and we really wanted to make sure that no one story was more amplified than another. So we did a call out to a New York City-based silent disco company, and they're called Quiet Hours New York. And we told them about our project, said that it's grassroots, we've had no funding, but we're really looking for support and sponsorship in having headsets for production. And they donated 150 headsets for our upcoming performance in the fall, which is really exciting because what we're going to do is have a big table of all the headsets available, and then after the performance, after people hear the collage of narratives, after people receive the zine or experience the somatic delivery of the narratives through the dance performance, we're going to encourage people to actually listen to the stories one by one on their own. Because although we really want to create a place for collective conversation, for people to experience things together, we also acknowledge neurodiversity and divergent ways of learning and receiving information, and sometimes that does involve a little bit more one-on-one with each of the narratives. In order to make this more of a conversation than a performance, we've constantly been thinking about the way that we receive information and the way that we digest information. So what we did for this production, after people listen to each of the stories via the headsets, is we're going to have 3 large white erase boards, and we just got donated 3 large white erase boards by Material for the Arts, based in New York City. And this is a way for people to write their takeaways and their personal experiences with the entire installation on a public format for them to have a public contemplative moment that is witnessed and seen, in hopes that perhaps in seeing each other's, whether it's finding common ground or completely oppositional experiences, that hopefully we can incentivize conversation to generate some type of initiative. And artists and dancers deserve to be supported, period. Like, they deserve to be supported for their time, energy, devising process, and for all the labor they have worked up until this point for establishing their craft. We also have 4 directors involved that deserve to be compensated for their time adequately. But it's not just the directors and it's not just the dancers that are needing compensation, but we have a whole crew that have dedicated a year of investment into this. We have the audio engineer, the designer who helped with the zine. We have 29 storytellers that have contributed personal accounts with their experiences that deserve to be compensated for their time and resources, because time is a precious resource. We also have all the contributors of the zine, and it's wonderful that they submitted their publication. But just like any writer that submits a publication to New York Times, in the same way that all the artists, digital, photography, print, muralists, they deserve to be compensated for their replication of their work in the zine. So we need your help, really, because so many people have been dedicating their time and resources, and it has been a full-on labor of love. But love can only get us so far right now, because people have dedicated their gifts, and we want to now compensate for everyone for their gifts. So, $5, $10, $20, it doesn't really matter. Just supporting artists, holding a conversation around the subject matter that we're discussing is huge, and it just will help to carry our message forward. So let's do this. Let's do this, because it's not just us doing it, but it's you, it's me, it's everybody. And yes, the community storytelling competition, sure, we are technically carrying this out, but with your contribution, you're becoming a collaborator too. So let's co-collaborate.